everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by American YouTuber, comedian, life coach, and businessman, JP Sears. JP, welcome to the show. We're really interested in learning about you. I want to just roll straight up to the life coach situation. First and foremost, for people that maybe are not totally familiar with you, tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is you do, because maybe some people haven't caught you on YouTube. Where can they see you? What is it that you do? And why are so many people into it?
Yeah, well, thank you for all that, Laura, and thank you for having me on. In a word, I'm a comedian, and I like to use comedy to guide people to their God-given freedoms and to follow their heart and their own critical thinking, because I think that's pretty important. And comedy is just a tool, a language I speak to hopefully waken people up to their own brilliance and their God-given freedoms. So in a word, I'm a comedian, and I've been doing professional comedy for 7 years now, online videos. I'm on YouTube and all the platforms. My handle is Awaken with JP. Also tour. I'm constantly doing shows. But before I was doing comedy, I was a full-time life coach, helping people help themselves, in their own issues, their life dramas, helping them heal unprocessed pain, all under the life coaching umbrella. So I got to learn about the deeper workings of the human psyche during the 13 years I was doing that. Of course, doing my own self-work along the way, because that's the most important part.
Aren't we all just doing constant self-work? To me, like being a life coach, JP, I have to tell you, when I read this about you, I basically was like, you are just, it's like the epitome of success to me, because I feel like we're all, I can barely get through the day. I feel like I wake up every morning, and maybe this is like just a standard mom situation. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm going to make so much time today for things that I need to get done. Meanwhile, I'm like rushing to get the kids dressed, rushing to get them to eat breakfast, rushing so they're on time to school. Now my kids are both in school. It's 2 schools. And then it's like that the rest of the day. A life coach, I feel like you really have it figured out and together. I mean, is that how you feel, or am I just like, should I just go ahead and go in that direction and just say, like, state it like a life coach?
I think you're completely delusional, Laura. I don't have anything remotely figured out, but I think the difference between someone who's, just scooting through in life and not working on themselves versus someone who works on themselves, the person that works on themselves, they're in chaos, but they're trying to figure it out. And I think
it's me every day.
It's a big difference. To me, I've never met a single person who's sitting up on the pedestal. They're like, oh yeah, like I don't have stress. I've got everything in order. I think if we had everything in order, life would actually be very boring, because if you look at the nature of the universe, it's constantly expanding. And the one thing about life that never changes is the fact that everything's always changing. So I think part of feeling in balance in our life is realizing it's like we're a surfer, we're on the wave, and the wave is constantly moving, but the good surfer knows how to go with the flow, adjust their center of gravity, and it's like, yep, fight with a spouse, like that's going to be a thing, but does that throw us off for a week? Do we have healthy communication to make the fight, resolve and we learn from it, or does it like just progressively deteriorate us? So it's happy dysfunction versus dysfunctional dysfunction.
Wow. Now, see, this is why you're a life coach and why I'm not. That analogy with the wave, I mean, so good. That's exactly, and that's what people need to hear. We all need to keep that sort of thing in mind. But I feel like the way that you go about things, obviously on YouTube, you said you're kind of originally a comedian. You take a very satirical approach to your videos on life coaching and all of it. I mean, I watched one of your videos basically about like what you expect to happen when having kids versus like what really happens when you have kids. And it's basically spot on. But all of your stuff is really funny. And I don't think you generally see that approach. I mean, do you think that that's maybe why you have so many followers, why you kind of quickly became one of those people? I mean, you were kind of an original YouTuber, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I appreciate that all the compliments embedded in the question, and I think the satire, the satire is my natural form of humor. It's just what's most natural to me. And I also think the nature of satire lends itself to need to be rooted in intelligence. Whereas, like, by contrast, slapstick humor, it can be great, but it's more goofy rather than based in intelligence. And granted, the slapstick comedians are still all brilliant, but they're not needing to come from a place of intelligence. They're coming from goofiness. So I think that has been an appeal to people. And then honestly, what's grown my audience exponentially has been the past year and a half, where I've taken a stand for freedom, because it's my number one value. And starting about a year and a half ago, first time in my life, freedoms of mine, my family, my loved ones, my friends, and my country have been infringed on, and people outside of our country. And I didn't know freedom was my number one value until it started getting taken away. And at the time I learned, oh, my wife is pregnant with our firstborn son. Now he's 9 months old. It's amazing. But all of that combined, realizing I've got a child coming into the world, I'm like, I have to do everything in my power to make this world as good of a place for my son as possible. My life and other people's lives, but like, you have kids, what's activated in you when you've got your kids coming. So, and I know I'm just one person, but I had to do everything in my power, realizing, hey, I've got a following, I've got a responsibility, and I'm, connected to my heart and soul, which is guiding me to stand for freedom, whether it's popular or not. I got to do it. I'm willing to risk everything because I know what matters most.
Well, it's obviously, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what matters most isn't anything anybody can take away, whether YouTube deplatforms me, all the things that are at risk, or cancel culture. It's like, yeah, I've got perspective. What they can take away isn't what matters. What matters is the freedom of my family and my countrymen, because freedom is what makes life worth living. I think that's why God gives us freedom as our birthright. And freedom is what allows us to express our God-given divine nature. That's why communism, they cut people off from God, they outlaw religion, because without freedom, they can't have their divinity flowing. And if you don't have their divinity flowing, they're very easy to control. So I know freedom is what makes life worth living. So that's what I have to stand for. And that's what my comedy has become. And that's attracted a massive amount of people into my audience as of the past year and a half.
Well, I mean, you're saying you didn't know really what the response would be when you started doing that. And by the way, you're right, because they're basically the folks and the powers that be, the mainstream media and such, they would have you believe that unless you fully agree with their perspective on things, and no one in the country agrees with you, they're right about it, you're wrong about it, and you're going to get canceled if you speak out about it. But obviously, that's not the case. Obviously, there are many, many people, JP, who agree with exactly what you're talking about, the fact that our freedoms have been at stake. I saw the video you did. I would love people to look this one up. It's a short video. It'll only take a few minutes, but where you were like a doctor talking about COVID. And I mean, you were talking about, or the vaccine, I insinuated it to be, but you basically talk about like stabbing yourself with a knife, right? And like, that's the whole video, is you talking about how stabbing yourself with a knife is not a big deal. It's safe. Totally no problem. But if you watch it, you see how ridiculous so much of what has been pushed on us is over the past, now at this point, like 8 months or so, by the government. And the problem is that there is no choice given to us. You talk in there about the fact that it's like, oh, well, you can be in a room with other people as long as they have been knifed as well. And then you can all congregate together. Otherwise, no one is going to be around you. These are things that I think we all talk about amongst ourselves and say, well, what is this? What are we doing to our country if we're able to force people essentially to take a vaccine or have a vaccine? That, by the way, if you want the vaccine, I'm all for it. I am not for forcing people to have it. But I think you really tapped in to something important there, and it is all ultimately about freedom. So what was the response when you started doing these? I mean, I don't want to call them politically kind of leaning videos, but essentially that's what they are. You must have had a big burst of an audience that kind of like discovered you, right?
Yeah, and I'll own it. They're absolutely conservative leaning videos. And I love to be a critical thinker. I'm not someone who says like, okay, what's the right think about this issue? And that's what I'll think I think. It's like, no, I got my own brain. I'll use it.
Common sense. Yes. Imagine that.
But right now, and I wish this wasn't the case, but the reality is the right stands for freedom and the left wants to take freedoms. That's not okay with me. So when I started making the political videos and leaning absolutely conservative, it was, the spring of 2020, and of course the propaganda, so unfair propaganda against Trump and Trump supporters. Well, you're without a doubt racist, and like we're not going to tell you why, but like you just are, you better believe it. That was so hot because the election was coming up in a few months. So internally, when I was just getting going, I had a fear of like, I think this might cost me followers. I might lose my audience, but I'm not someone who gets intimidated by fear. I'm someone like, if something scares me, but I feel a heartfelt purpose of doing it, I'll do it anyway. So I did it, and it turned out to be like just phenomenal for business. My audience has never grown more because something you said, there's way more freedom-loving people out there than what you see on the news. Like,
that's right. Oh, is that your son in the background?
Yeah.
Love it.
You wanted to say hi.
Like you're at my house. I'm so happy I'm not the only one. You're right, though. There are so many more people that I feel like look at what's going on right now and say, this is crazy. This is un-American. But JP, they're so scared to speak up. They're so scared to say anything.
Yeah, more speaking up as time goes on, way more than 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I've got the opportunity. I travel around constantly doing stand-up comedy performances, and since the whole pandemic hit, I've been everywhere from Florida to Portland and everywhere in between. And if you go by the mainstream media's perspective, which, like, newsflash, it's not a truthful portrayal of reality, but you think like, oh, JP, you're going to Portland with conservative values and preaching messages of freedom through language of comedy, like you get kicked out of the city.
Yeah, you're gonna get just strung up. They're just gonna like run you out of town. That's it.
That's what you would think, but no, I found out I did 12 sold out shows in Portland. Oh. There are so many freedom loving people in the most liberal places. It's just they don't have the voice through the mainstream media, and many of them have taken a while to find their own voice of courage, but they're waking up because, it's scary to start voicing your perspective and standing for something when there's all the propaganda against you. But I think we're reaching at a time where people are realizing, oh, it's what will happen if I keep suppressing my voice. That's more scary than what will happen if I actually stand in my truth. So more and more people are standing in the truth. We have more to come, but we've got great momentum for Team Freedom. So we got more work to do, but I'm very optimistic.
Yeah. Did you feel like a weight was lifted off you when you finally kind of went for it and said, you know what, I'm just going to put out there what I believe, and whatever people think of it, they can cancel me. Did you ever get shut off of social media? Did they ever censor you or anything?
Yeah, I've had various pieces and videos censored. I've had warnings from YouTube. I no longer do I put videos on Facebook because they told me you're on the verge of having your 3 million fan page deleted.
Wow.
So I'm certainly very cognizant of how I'm articulating my messages because, big tech has its one true narrative that it's willing to accept, but it's like that's where I can reach a lot of people, and I'm not a fan of big tech's censorship of speech or the White House's instructing Facebook what to censor. Not a fan of that, but I am a fan of reaching people. So if I need to tailor my message and share with people what I have to say in a creative way so they know what I'm really saying without me directly hitting the topic, the words that are going to get me deplatformed, then I'll do that. And I think it actually makes me a better, more creative creator.
Yeah, you have to really kind of tap dance around and figure out what words you have to stay away from, I guess. Because honestly, this video will probably get taken down because I literally talked about COVID. Yeah. And I guarantee you that there will be some ramification. There'll be some reaction. There'll be something that happens. It happens pretty much every week in some respect. But you think back to the things that they were censoring, gosh, less than a year ago, like the Hunter Biden laptop story turned out to be true, turned out to be accurate. When anyone would talk about the COVID virus coming from a Wuhan lab as a possibility, off of social media, your posts taken down, censored in some way. Now we know all these things were true. So I don't know how long they can ultimately keep this sort of thing up. I think at some point people start to lose faith in their censorship and say, well, what you're censoring actually turns out to be true. So what are we doing here? But I think you said something earlier that I just want to go back to, because I think that it's a really pivotal time in the history of our country. Obviously, there's been a lot that has happened really in the past year and a half. But I think the more people start to see, especially what is going on in this country now, what we just saw happen overseas, the freedoms taken away from us here in so many places in the United States of America under the guise of COVID, an election that was certainly changed in illegal ways under the guise of COVID, as the last election was. We will also be censored for me even talking about that.
And considered a terrorist, by the way.
Yeah. But what's that? Oh, yeah, we're terrorists. We're domestic terrorists because we voted for Trump. But there are so many people, I think, that never would have guessed that they would ever consider themselves a conservative. And maybe they don't even consider themselves a conservative, but they see a party in the Democrat Party that has truly left them. It is not the party it used to be. It is truly going down the path of socialism. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just take a look around at what's going on in this country. And I just have a feeling that things are going to heavily sway back in the direction of conservatives over the next few years. And quite frankly, I think they have to. Otherwise, I don't even know if we have anything left at a certain point.
I agree. I think right now the best campaign for conservatives, and if your father-in-law runs for the office, or if it's DeSantis, but the best campaigner for conservatives right now is the Biden administration. They're absolutely, and I will happy to get us censored for this. If we have a fair election next time, the Biden administration is winning more votes for the right than the right could ever win for themselves. And I don't say that out of exaggeration. I just say that off of observation. I mean, whatever corrupt people are running this puppet of Biden, they're doing too much too fast. It's not obvious the corruption that, I used to think like the Democrats, like, cool, great people, like we need balance. But I'm also not afraid when I see a corrupt, evil takeover happening. I'm not afraid to say that. And it's obvious from my point of view, that's what's happened. And now the corruption, it's not hidden anymore. It is so obvious, justifying taking away Americans' rights over, through fear-based propaganda, relentlessly trying to scare people into giving up their rights over a virus that carries a 99.98% survival rate. And by the way, the 0.02% who do succumb to it, my heart goes out to them. And also 94% of them have comorbidities. Right. So it's just, people aren't dumb enough to fall for it. And I know people want to be taken care of and they'll be dumb for a while, but people can only pretend they're less intelligent than they truly are for a while. And these people are, they're just winning a lot of favor for the conservatives right now.
It's so true. It is so true. If we have a free and fair election in 22 and 24, I mean, there's zero doubt in my mind that it will be a landslide. And by the way, we've already like gone off the deep end with how this video will ultimately be censored. So let me just point out a couple of the things. I was thinking about this the other day that will get you censored if you talk about them, if you post about them. Say it on national television, the whole thing, like it's a disaster. You can't talk about COVID. You can't talk about the vaccine. You can't talk about the election. You can't talk about January 6th. And now, JP, you can't even talk about the disaster that happened over in Afghanistan under Joe Biden and the embarrassment that we as Americans now feel because of one individual and his absolutely terrible decisions. Those are all things that will get you censored. And gosh, if you break all of those things down, it is so clear that what is going on is that it is about ultimate control here. They want to control all of us. They want to give us the information as they want us to see it, not information as it should truly be given, not just the facts, and let us, as you said earlier, critically think about things and decide. So 22, 24, going to be very, very big years. And I can tell you there are a lot of people out there that are working very hard on the conservative side to reverse all of the illegally changed, basically voting rules in all across the country in various states, because things were changed illegally that should never have been changed. And I will never, you can never convince me that it did not help Joe Biden win 81 million votes.
Yeah.
If you believe that. Some people may still believe that. You also can't talk about that. They'll censor you for that. I want to get back to your life coaching though, because I am curious if there's one piece of advice that maybe you could share with our audience, maybe something that you think maybe applies to everyone that we could all use. I don't know, especially in a time like right now where it feels like things are very chaotic. We're all stressed. We're all worried about what's happening next. Any advice that you have out there for everybody?
Yeah, don't outsource your truth. The ancient wisdom is all truth is found within. We need to follow our hearts and feel for what's true for us. And, this goes back to the Buddha. I'm not pretending like I'm the one that like, hey, like I thought of the idea, like all truth is found within. And right now we're living in an age where the people who want to violate you tempt you to outsource your truth routinely. Censorship is something that teaches you to violate your sense of truth. Fact checkers treat you as you're so dumb that you can't think for yourself. I think there was even a New York Times article, if I'm not mistaken, that was speaking out against critical thinking of all things.
God.
So, truth
wow.
from within. Consider outside sources, yes, but don't outsource your truth. Get it from within. And, our hearts, our souls, and if you believe in a higher power, your connection to God, that will never mislead you.
That's right.
Fact checkers, censors, the mainstream media, it's proven they not only have a track record of misleading you, but they do it on purpose and they do it often.
Yeah.
So people are miraculous. People, when we're in touch with our true nature, we're good, we're kind, we're honest, and we have our hearts guiding us and our own critical thinking guiding us. And that's what we need more of. And when we connect to that, we're in a good spot.
I think so too. I totally agree with that. And you know what? I really think that, if you step back and you just step away for a moment from all of the incoming information. I mean, I wish that I could just turn off the TV and get off of the internet and get off of social media. I mean, unfortunately for what I do in my family, it's sort of tough to do that. So I'm not able to do that. But if we are an American family here in this country, and we always have been. And I talked about this the other day, but we're approaching the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And I mean, it was such an awful day. I remember, as so many people do, exactly where I was, exactly what was happening in that moment. And I remember the months following September 11th, JP, everybody in this country felt incredibly united. And I truly believe we can get back to that place. We have to stop letting people divide us. We have to remember that we are more alike than we are different. We have to remember that, at the end of the day, if you need help, we're going to help you as your fellow American. And that's what it's all about. And we have to just listen to our hearts. I agree with you, and listen to our guts. And we know that we're good people. We know that we're not inherently bad. We're not inherently racist. We're not anything. And I'm so sick of people who work overtime to try and divide us. We know why they do it. We know that they want to divide us because, a house divided cannot stand, and that's their ultimate goal. But I really believe that we can get back to that place, and that feeling that we had that really united all of us. Sadly, it was because we had a terrorist attack on American soil. But we all should remember how we felt in the months following 9/11, because I remember feeling like, we're all in this together, and we can do anything, and we have to get back to that place. I think we can. Do you think we can ever get back there?
Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful vision, Laura. I agree. And out of the tragedy of 9/11, part of the silver lining, the gift of that tragedy is that unification that you talked about. Because I remember as well where if you had different beliefs of people, it didn't matter. You accepted each other. It's like, cool, you believe that, I believe the opposite, and like, we're good. Arm around, yeah. Let's go have a beer together. And, with my friends and family, we're close for a reason, because our relationships and our love for each other, it's not based on needing to agree with each other. It's just based on accepting each other.
Yeah.
We're never going to have a country where everybody agrees on everything. If we did,
nor would we want to live somewhere like that, right?
We wouldn't grow. So
boring.
But I think you're right. And honestly, with Biden's incompetence in Afghanistan, I feel some of that post 9/11 unity where now it's like, hey, we're uniting on something way bigger than, the left versus the right. We're uniting on what's right. Mm-hmm. Caring for our fellow countrymen, doing the right thing. We see someone who's deliberately doing the wrong thing, putting our own citizens and our allies right under the bus in the most horrendous way. And we're uniting over that. It's a tragedy what's happening. And I do feel like we're actually getting more united over that. And
I agree.
Virgin is right. I think that can grow.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And as you were talking, I was just remembering, if people remember this, there are photos from September 11th, 2001, where tragically there was ash falling all over the people in the streets of New York, police officers, firefighters, people that worked in the buildings. Everyone was covered in gray ash. You couldn't see, the color of anyone's skin. You could barely tell, what people looked like at all. Everybody was just the same. And that's really how I believe most people see one another in this country. I don't think they look at each other and see each other for, their sexual orientation, for the color of their skin, for their religion. People don't ultimately care. If you're a nice person, then I want to be friends with you. And I think that we all really feel that way deep down, and somehow we're getting manipulated, at least some people are, into believing differently. So I have to ask you this. I ask everybody, what do you think is the best part of America? What do you think, JP, is the biggest threat to the future of our country?
Well, starting with that part, I think the biggest threat to the future of our country is fear. I think fear is the only way that corrupt people can control the masses. Yeah. And you see people getting hypnotized with fear 24 hours a day through the mainstream media. Large percentage of it is just fear-based stuff, usually not even based in truth. So fear is what will get intelligent people to behave like morons that turn against each other. They have to be afraid to do that. So I think fear is the biggest threat to our country. But I think the best value, the best thing about Americans is bravery. I mean, that's what our country's founded on.
Yeah.
When we're bravery, we're not just serving each other. I think we're serving God. People are willing to be brave, risk their life because they're standing for something bigger than their life. They're standing for God and countrymen and their fellow humans. So, when people are brave, they're not controllable. That's why the brave people in our armed forces, they're willing to die in the name of freedom because they're brave and they know that freedom is bigger than just their own self. So brave people can't be controlled, and enough brave people united can 100% not be stopped. And we live in the bravest country on earth. And there's some sheep in our country. There's some fear-based people in our country. I've been there. The cool thing is, if you're living under fear right now, you have a choice in any given moment to live in fear or live in bravery. The choice is yours. And no matter how brave you are, that takes you to freedom. If you have a little bit of bravery or living in fear, but if you become more brave, you're living in freedom. So we're inherently born and bred in bravery. And right now we're really remembering our true nature of bravery as a country. So I'm optimistic. We still have a lot more awakening of our bravery to do, but that's what I love most about America and what I think is going to see us through this dark, challenging time.
Yeah, gosh, and I certainly hope so. So where can people find you next? What do you have going on? Are you touring? Any new videos? What can we expect from you?
Yeah, well, I love a good shameless self-promotion, Laura.
Let's do it.
Best place to find me on my website is awakenwithjp.com. I certainly post my videos there, my tour schedule. I'm always touring. It's there. I've got some freedom merch if that appeals to people. And I'm publishing a minimum of 2 new videos every week. And so subscribe to my YouTube channel, Awaken with JP, and I'm on all the things, Rumble, Instagram. But my website is the central point, awakenwithjp.com.
Love it. Love it. Well, JP Sears, thank you for coming on The Right View tonight. We're so happy to have heard from you. I think let's get brave in this country. To your point, let's get through this. I know we can push through this time. I think a lot of people, maybe they need to just go check out a couple of your videos, get inspired, remind themselves why this is the greatest country in the world and why they should not be sheep. So JP Sears, thanks for joining us. And as always, to everybody at home, thank you so much for joining us right here on The Right View. We'll see you back here next time.